Let's lock in.
We are locked in.
We're locked in.
We're locked in live.
We're locked in live for another normal Honc Out. Like wipe summer is over and we are back to the roots, I guess.
No more vibes.
Back to the lock-in September.
Well, we just spoke about energy drinks. You have kind of an energy drink. You have a Coke there, so
it's not an energy. That doesn't count. I think this is no. Luckily, it's not. We had these fake out drinks in the office that were the like 0 caffeine, 0 sugar, and I accidentally drank one last week, and I was kind of disappointed. I was disappointed. I'll be honest. I was disappointed. Took like 2 or 3 sips. Yeah.
But I think your drink fits our theme because it's light, right? So it's a diet version of.
Wow, what a segue! Were you planning that before we started? Because that was incredible.
No, I was just thinking about it because I saw you as a can. I was like, yep, that fits. Because we want to talk about a light version of an MCP SDK library that Lau, who also is here, has just released. And I'm super excited for it.
Can I do a tagline? It's mcp-lite. Sugar-free, but still sweet.
We should get an energy drink for MCP-lite. So like a sugar-free version of something.
That will work. I mean, we need something else than sweet, but it is pretty sweet to build with.
That's not a good tagline. Actually, it's an okay tagline.
That's okay.
MCP-lite. It's pretty sweet.
Work in progress. Also a tagline.
Also a tagline. But yeah, maybe back to the topic. I mean, it's not 0 sugar, I guess, MCP-lite, but what makes the MCP library light actually? Lau, if you can give, maybe you need to give a little bit more context before you can go to the light part, but I would be interested in that.
Sure. I think, okay, so, well, we've been talking about MCP every other stream. I think last time I was on Honc Out, we also spoke about MCP, so we've been building a lot with it. I remember following, the whole thing from November, December when it started, and it started as the library, the SDK and the API principles really evolved as a little bit of an emulation of the LSP, the language server protocol, and the first runtime and environment that MCP would run was all local using standard in and out, and so a lot of the sort of initial assumptions were such that you run this locally, you have all of the dependencies and everything that you have on your machine. We're now going into the world where there's more use probably of MCP servers over remote connections. So the streamable HTTP one being the primary one. And the main thing that sort of what prompted to start is to start MCP-lite is one, these MCP servers run on far more diverse runtimes than maybe the initial one. So they don't necessarily have the Node.js dependencies. The MCP servers are often deployed on serverless environments that are, I mean, some might be Node.js compatible, but most aren't. And there's a sort of, I mean, Zod is the main king of schema validation in TypeScript, but there are more ways to validating these JSON or PC messages that go between MCP client and MCP server, and those seem to have been the main two pain points in the community in the MCP world, and also some things that sort of we faced building out our own MCP servers. And so we decided, like, okay, let's try it out. What if we built something from scratch? What does that look like? And we have a lot of good practices, and I mean, we like Hono. It's in the name of this. You don't like it?
No, I said we still like it.
We still like it. We still like Hono. I think it's one of the exemplary APIs, both in terms of the DX and the type experience that you have using TypeScript, and then as a sort of a runtime agnostic tool that you can deploy anywhere. So just said, what if we took the learnings from that and rebuilt an MCP library from scratch using those? And so MCP-lite. Yeah.
So I guess because it's Hono inspired, I can run it runtime independent, right? So I can plug it in all the TypeScript runtimes or JavaScript runtimes I can think of. That's true,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. The main key points of it are it's lightweight and zero dependencies. It supports. It's primarily focused around supporting the streamable HTTP transport and using it over remote connections. Although if you wrote your own, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to. But like right now, we're focusing our development on that. It is composable with a middleware-like system, so it has some similar. If you've used Hono, there's some things that we sort of borrowed, some ideas that we borrowed that we think can be useful here. We can kind of go into that later, and then we have standard schema validation. So any standard schema supporting vendor can define. You can define your tools and prompts and resources where schema validation is necessary using any of those.
Might be worthwhile to explain standard schema a little bit.
Yes. Standard schema is, you can pull
keep
it
explaining. Oh, yeah, you're going to pull it up? Because, yeah.
That might be, so standard schema is a common interface for TypeScript validation libraries, an excellent project in the world that started, I think, start of this year with Zod, Validbot, Archetype, there's like a lot of them, but they all share, they all sort of achieve the same thing with different interfaces and engines under the hood. And so they kind of got together and decided, it was like, okay, this is going to be the common interface for any libraries that want to plug those validation elements. So TypeScript doesn't by itself have a way for you to guarantee that a type is something at runtime. It's effectively the derogatory word is a fancy linter. And so you want to use schema to ensure that there's like a standardized way to check if the data that you're passing in is actually a string or a number. And all of these share the same interface. So you can swap them, combine them, and so on. It's most exciting for library developers, such as, for example, for MCP-lite, because most likely if you picked one, you stick with one. But yeah, that's sort of the main thing about standard schema.
Nice. I mean, since you are already sharing, do you like to give us a quick intro into the library and how you would spin up a project with MCP-lite, how you include it into your projects?
Yes. So it's available as MCP-lite as a package on NPM.
And could you zoom in?
Yes. Let me hit a couple of times. That's good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll show the GitHub page. There's more stuff here, I think. But you can install it like any other package. Or you can use, I think as of yesterday, we have a create MCP-lite that Brett can...
Wasn't planning on advertising that, but I guess it's...
Yeah, you go.
As you can see, it's 0.0.3, so use at your own risk. But I think for now, the canonical way would be to just adding it as an MCP-lite dependency. There's not a lot of ceremony to adding it to your device, to your server. You instantiate it as you would in the official MCP SDK. And then you can, there's, for adding a tool, there's a simple .tool interface. This is sort of the mental model that we map is a little bit like tools are kind of like routes in a lot of ways. So, just calling .tool and having that match a certain sort of expect a certain input schema, and then in the handler do stuff with the expected defined return type is sort of the way to go. And then to map it together, we still have the separation. I think it's quite nicely separated in the spec that you have the transport that is agnostic and separate from the core of the MCP server logic itself. So you instantiate streamable HTTP transport, bind it to your MCP server, and then that's your sort of fetch-like function that you can pass in a request to. So this is the raw requests coming from Hono. This is that is a web standard fetch request that you can pass into the HTTP handler, and it will sort of take it from there.
I do have a quick question. At the moment, do we also support sampling, prompts, and resources, or is it something we have on the agenda?
So we currently support tools, prompts, and resources. It's quite early, of course, so we don't support sampling or elicitations, but the prompts and resources are supported. But there's no incremental updates, for example. Notifications and progress updates are not there, but being worked on as we speak. So that should land hopefully sometime this week.
Nice.
Let's see. So as you can see in the sort of quick start example, the way I think the pattern that we suggest to use it is with your API framework. So it's not sort of a completely separate thing. You still have traditional HTTP routes. It's just only that there's this special /MCP route that sort of by convention and by spec required as a that one speaks the JSON RPC dialect of Model Context Protocol, and if you connect your MCP server to that route, it will be able to to handle that logic. Let's see what else is worth flagging. So you might notice there's something else in the MCP server instantiation that is slightly different from the official Model Context Protocol SDK, which is something we added called schema adapter. And this is something that allows us to plug any validation library that you'd want. So by default, if you instantiate a MCP server, it will only support JSON schema. MCP speaks JSON RPC. Any sort of information needs to be serialized to JSON, and without it makes sense to use that as default definition. It's very basic. You don't get a lot of type inference from that in your handler, but it's sort of like if you don't want anything else, that's the most bare bones version. But then if you do, the only thing you need to do to support that is to provide a schema adapter. And the schema adapter is something that takes as an input that standard schema. So it can be Zod, can be archetype, can be validbot, and uses whatever that library's best practice is to convert into JSON schema, and sort of runs that before sort of serializing and storing the tool registrations and communicating those out to the client. Is like one line extra to write, but it's it's a little bit sort of more straight, sort of because the JSON RPC is JSON, we can't sort of communicate standard schema or Zod or whatever directly over the wire. So that was the sort of a bit of a decision on like, okay, we just make that explicit and you can do whatever you want in this route. I don't know, Brett, if you want to, I think you've been building more now with different validation libraries, and if you've had any hiccups or things are running into it.
Yeah, I think there's just a PR I opened like 20 minutes ago that fixes archetype support. But it's, I mean, well, so yeah, archetype didn't strictly work, but it's like sort of work. It worked with type inference before, which is pretty awesome. But if you like had the incorrect property name, it didn't always cause validation error by default. What would I say? Yeah, I don't know. This is just kind of in the spirit of you should be able to use the tools that you are already using in your stack or are already comfortable with. And yeah, not having a dependency on one validation library versus the other is just, yeah, good practice for, especially for something that's going into API land, because a lot of these like new MCP servers will be remote HTTP, streamable HTTP. That means they'll likely be embedded in APIs, and TypeScript APIs typically have a validation library, and oftentimes it's Zod, but not all the time. And there are reasons not to use Zod, especially if you're writing Greenfield. So that's kind of the fun part. Just like seeing it work and just work was very gratifying. But I don't know if I have particular things to say beyond that.
Anything you'd like to add about the create MCP-lite that you didn't want to advertise, but we mentioned already? So
no, it's just, if you want to use it, use it. It's like you will need access to FiberPlane. We don't need. It's just, it's going to create an echo server for you, and it will try to deploy that to FiberPlane. And that is still very like whatever comes before alpha. The whole like local deployments and local workflow has absolutely no warranty void, I guess we would put, whatever the MIT license says. And yeah, that's that. I think it's a little bit up in the air whether we would want the create flow to do something like, hey, what's your validation library? We'll install it. That could be a nice step there. And even something as far as like, what is your deployment target could be another interesting take. So it's just, it's very, it's not done.
But it is there. So, but I think that's cool.
I don't know. Maybe it's not necessarily worthwhile right now. We could draw a comparison of like what the current predominating TypeScript SDK looks like relative to this kind of API, but maybe we say that for another time, just because there's like slight differences in naming of like, ours is just server.tool versus server.register tool. But yeah, maybe that's for a future demo.
Yeah, I can share a little more on some of the unique aspects of the MCP-lite library specifically, which is the sort of middleware pattern. So this is something I alluded to earlier, which is we've added so if you've used Hono or really any TypeScript API framework, they have some sort of like often.use call that you can essentially insert some logic before or after the main handler runs. And you can use this to, for example, for observability or for adding certain permissions and authentication logic inside of this as well. So this is something that then is run if you call it before next. That will be executed before that. So the order of middleware registration is important, and they will be executed as in that order specifically. And the context object that you can see, the CTX on here, is also available inside of the tool call handler. So this is an easy way to sort of pass in certain information without prop drilling effectively. But that's it's available as if you go to the second parameter, it's not going to be obvious from the GitHub call, but like the second parameter inside of this handler function, besides the first one being arguments, is going to be the context.
Talk a little bit about, I see two different things we could bring up. One is forward-looking statements on what might be unlocked by having zero dependency and web standard library. Or the other is also forward-looking statements on the idea of composability.
Yes. We can talk a little bit about that. So the web standards is the main thing is JavaScript that can run anywhere. So you could run this in Cloudflare workers. You could run this in Dino. You could run this in any of the sort of whatever the edge environment it is that just runs browser standards. You will be able to run it, including the browser itself.
That's what I was fishing for.
I have not yet tried to run this inside of a browser, but I'd be interested to. I reckon you might need a custom transport, because I don't know how.
I would imagine because you could run it in a service worker. This is the same. I mean, okay, we should asterisk give credit to or footnote, I don't know what we call it, to Aditya, a previous guest on the show who commented about this on Twitter. Like, hey, put an MCP server in the browser. And I'm like, it makes sense because he's a Hono person. And I think one of the novel uses of Hono is to be able to have a router inside of a service worker. And it just works like your normal API router. So I'm curious if you can put it and kind of like intercept requests somehow that way. I don't know if that would, I don't know. We'd have to see.
Yeah, I think that's if anyone is keen to try out these use cases, MCP-lite is probably going to be a great thing to try this out on. So that's one thing. Anywhere you can run JavaScript, you'll be able to run MCP-lite and build an MCP server. And another thing would be composability. So there's effectively for like future, there's kind of two branches of work. One, if you look at the issues board of this, there's like a huge spec compliance section. So we're like nowhere near full spec compliance for supporting the server use cases. So elicitation sampling, but also some of the more nitty gritty stuff like notifications and progress updates that I mentioned. So that's one strand of work. The other is, as I mentioned, we're Hono inspired in some of the APIs. So I think one of the things that are coming down the pipe the soonest, besides more middleware use cases and patterns to explore, is the equivalent of Hono's .route. So you could more easily compose instances of MCP server that you maybe have modularized across your application. So this would allow you to create MCP servers with more tools or more complex tool scenarios, maybe more permissioned ones, things like that. That's sort of a little bit of the kind of thought behind making it Hono inspired. the modularization using Hono, the experience of modularization using Hono is very nice, and we thought it's worth bringing over to the MCP world.
I think the only thing I had in mind for that is, so with the design decision of having that schema adapter, it does tie that server instance to one particular schema validation. Yeah. Theoretically, you could switch based off of the vendor type, right? If you wrote a specific. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself.
You could write some logic in there. So we'll, not to make the stream sort of live designing the group, the dot group method, but that's going to be one of the things to solve is like, okay, you have one MCP server instance using Zod and another using archetype for whatever reason.
Yeah.
How do they reconcile?
Yeah, I think okay. This is us live designing it. I'd imagine it just comes down to the schema adapter a little bit. Of that needs to be, if it's a standard schema, then it knows what vendor it is, and then it calls the right thing, and then you have to wire that together yourself because you're doing something ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was thinking like the group functionality would be a means of having two different validation libraries. So I don't know why, but people do wild things all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a chunk of your code base where there's massive schemas defined in Zod, and then another greenfield part of your code base where you were trying out archetype for the speed up. Who knows?
Yeah.
But composability could be helpful there. And I guess, I don't know, just for the general logical grouping of things. Oh, and possibly also, I don't know, have you mused a bit on like how you would group tools or resources and then mount them? Or is this too live?
It's too live. It's still fresh. But I think in the same way that like different parts of like taking Hono as the hallmark, like you'll have different parts of your application responsible for different things, and seem like even I would say maybe different MCP server instances handling resources and handling tools, because they're quite by behavior designed. Resources are meant as more sort of reading, getting the LLM to read things and fetch things and process that, and tools being the parts that you tell them to act on things, and they require maybe different permission levels, maybe different, and you might want to keep those separate.
Yeah, that was also something I was thinking about this morning, was the whole like dynamic tool lists depending on the permissions of an authorized user, for example.
Yeah.
I'm also kind of curious. Yeah, I don't know. I'm also curious about like anonymous. I don't think that would necessarily work. I'm trying to think of like an anonymous user MCP server that also allows you to upgrade to authenticated. But does that work with protocol?
That could work with protocol, I think. Like the most important thing is that the list of like the server advertises the list of things it can do.
Yeah.
And so it can advertise one thing, and once you've authenticated.
But how does it? Oh yeah, this is getting off topic. But how would you know to authenticate?
Would that not be like maybe a thing that the service offer as a tool to authenticate?
No, there's a very strict. That could be. Yeah, I don't know. We're not going to solve this right now. But yeah, it was a little bit of a brain teaser to myself this morning. So like there's a very strict protocol for how you have to advertise authentication. And we're going to the spec.
Live reading of the spec.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have to. We don't have to do it, but I thought I'd pull it up on screen for anybody anybody curious. But
I think aside, if we're launching, shows and podcasts left and right, I think my spin-off series is going to be a dramatic reading of the model context protocol specification.
We should do that live sometime.
Lots of different. I'm going to get
a live reading.
Yeah, I'm going to get like a famous British actor to do it too. It's going to be really good.
Okay, let me know when you have the famous British actor, and we can
Stephen
schedule.
Fry. Stephen Fry is going to read the model context protocol. You heard it now. He hasn't committed yet, but
we'll get there.
Yeah. Okay. Point being, that's a good question for the audience. If you have the answer, we might have a job for you.
And let us know.
Yeah. Okay. It's 30 minutes. Should we recap? Go on our merry way.
Yeah. That sounds.
Yeah. MCP-lite is live. Version is 0.1. So like, it's early, but I've seen people build cool stuff with it. Shout out Jürgen, who posted on Twitter one of the first things built with MCP-lite that has not come from the FiberPlane team, which is pretty cool to see. So yeah, go build with it and let us know what you think. Submit any issues on GitHub, and we'll keep you posted with updates.
Nice.
Tools list to be changed.
I think now if people want to ping you GitHub issues, is a good way to interact with this, right? And probably they also find you on our Discord server if they want to start a private conversation with you. I guess you are.
Yeah. That's the thing. Only DM Lau.
DM me with feature requests, and hopefully I can respond.
Nice. Cool. Thanks for showing and for joining, and I'm sure we will talk more about it. I also see that Joe is here, and he says it sounds cool. Nice. Maybe the next hack challenge will be about MCP-lite. Who knows? And with that, I would say I think we can end the stream. We can call it a stream, or any last words?
Last words. Elicitation.
Elicitation.